Welcome to the Influence Women podcast. I'm your host, Kathleen Cooke, and I'm excited to have filmmaker Alexandra Boylan with us. She's an actress, writer, producer, director, and she knows how to get it done. She's a veteran filmmaker and is going to share with you some of those tips and tricks and her journey along the way. So stay tuned. Now, like us and subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to ring the notification bell at the bottom so that you don't miss the next Influence Women podcast. Stay tuned with us with Alexandra Boylan. Hi, well, I'm so excited today to have Alexandra Boylan with us. She's an incredible veteran filmmaker and a great advocator of women working in film and getting women involved. So I'm so excited to have you with us today, Alexandra. I know you have a wealth of information that you have within you. You've done webinars for us that you can find online at influencewomen.org and on this podcast YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribing to the Influence Women podcast channel. We're bringing you some great women with great information, and today is no exception. So Alexandra, welcome to the Influence Women podcast. I know you're a veteran filmmaker. You've been around making several films. Your company, the Boylan Sisters Production Company, is ongoing, creating many things. Your recent film, Identity Crisis, though, has just exploded. And I'm so excited to share with our audience today what you've done and the film you've produced with that. But first of all, tell us just a little bit about your journey. You've had several conversations at events and places, webinars and things you've done about your journey, but perhaps someone new to this audience, to the podcast, is not aware of your background. So tell us a little bit about that.
Hi, Kathleen. Well, thank you so much for having me on. And I am thrilled to talk to everyone. I love Influence Women. I love everything it stands for. I am your biggest cheerleader, Kathleen, out there telling everyone about it. And, we need to support one another as women in this industry. We have to rally around each other. So I love what you're doing, and I'm honored to be here. And I love telling my story because it is so inspirational, and it really also does inspire others to get behind the camera and start creating. Don't wait for someone to pick you, choose yourself.
Yes.
And because if you wait for someone else, you might be waiting forever. So my quick story and background is that I grew up in Boston as a minister's kid. I loved the film industry. I wanted to be an actress. I was in every high school play and my father's church plays. And I was just absolutely fell in love with acting at a young age. And I knew it was what I wanted to do with my life. And at 19 years old, I packed up my Toyota Corolla and I moved to Los Angeles, California, all by myself. And I was like, I'm going to be a movie star, because that's what you do, right? You move to Hollywood and they're
that's
like,
the
there you are.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for you. And I ended up spending 10 years just pounding the pavement as an actor, trying to get an agent, kind of doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And I was a waitress, literally spent 10 years waiting tables, and such a stereotypical actress life. And in 2009, I woke up and was like, oh my gosh, if I don't do something different with my life, I'm going to be 40, 50, 60, still doing the same thing. And I just had hit rock bottom in Los Angeles. And I had been praying about moving to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I heard the industry was booming there, but I think I didn't have the courage at 29, like I had at 19, to just pack my bags and move. And literally in 1 week, I lost my job in my apartment. And I felt like I was like, I am sending you out of LA. How do I get you out of here? And I was like, okay, God, I'm leaving. I left and packed up my Toyota Corolla yet again. And I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I really went out there and I resurrendered my life to the Lord. And I'm like, okay, God, whatever I'm doing for my life is not working. Clearly, you don't want me to be an actress. And I was like, whatever you want for my life, Lord, I'll do it. And I really, was willing to give up the industry, which is huge when you have a dream, to say, I will give it all up. And when I was in New Mexico, I actually met all these incredible independent filmmakers who I was standing in and PAing on sets, and kind of a smaller fish in a big pond. And I felt like I was like, oh my gosh, why don't I just start making my own projects and put myself in it as the lead? And so I did. I met all these people. We started making shorts and web series, and we were teaching ourselves how to create content. And then we made our first feature film. 5 of us went to the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, made this little thriller that we thought maybe we'd show our parents. And then we ended up taking that thriller back to Los Angeles, where I found a sales agent, and the sales agent took it to American Film Market, and it sold by the end of the market to RLJ Releasing. And I went back to my sales agent and I said, okay, what's next? What do we do next? Can we work together? And he said, yes, but don't make another thriller. Next year, the market will be oversaturated in the thriller space. But what you really should do is faith-based family. And I literally felt like God struck the table and was like, I am calling you into faith-based, because it wasn't the trajectory I was on, even though I love the Lord. And I was like, okay, I will do it. And my sales agent was like, I will get the money if you make the movie. The only requirement is football. And I called my sister, Andrea.
Gotta have football in it. Gotta have that male aspect, right?
I called Andrea, enter my sister, the Boylan sisters. I called my sister. I said, hey, I got this opportunity to make a faith-based film. Do you want to consult on the script and help me with this? And she said yes. And we looked at the landscape of faith-based and did not see women being represented in the leading roles at all. And we thought, okay, we'll do this. We'll make the football movie. So I'm back to my sales agent and said, we're going to do the football movie, but want it to star a woman. And my sales agent was like, well, wait, you can't do that because there's no numbers in the marketplace to back up a female-driven faith-based film. And I was like, I think that's because nobody's doing it. But if we do it, could we pave the way and trailblaze and show that there's a huge audience who would love to see themselves represented in the leading role? So Ryan said, yes, I trust you. You can do it. I'll still give you the money. We only had $75,000 all in to make that movie. And I had to make a choice. I could either keep my Los Angeles apartment or make the movie. I couldn't afford both. So I was like, okay, God, I am in this to win this with you. And I put everything I owned in storage. I gave up my apartment in Hancock Park, and I ended up living out of a suitcase for 1 year to make Catching Faith a reality. And we shot that movie in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, in Andrea's hometown. And it went on to become the top 5 consistent selling movie for the distribution company.
Wow, that's awesome.
It paved the way for our entire career.
There you go. And it's called Catching Faith, right?
Called Catching Faith.
And then from there on, you went on to make Switched, and now you're working with Identity Crisis. And your films really have gone on to kind of hit the tween girl market out there. Yeah. So talk to us about that passion, how that kind of evolved into creating those Switched and the Identity Crisis.
Yeah, so obviously when we saw a need for women's stories. We saw an audience not being spoken to. And then after, Catching Faith came out, Wish for Christmas, and we really realized that there wasn't a lot of teen girl content that was hip and cool like Disney in the Christian space. And, Andrea and I grew up minister kids. So we knew what it was like to not have great content for us, but wanting to look for something that spoke to us that was hip and cool that we could share at a slumber party. When we were kids, we had Amy Grant, and thank goodness she was our rock star. And we were like, we need to provide content that's like Disney, that's super hip and cool, that these girls want to share at slumber parties, but that speaks into their faith and is clean and empowering. So then we came up with this idea for Switched, about these 2 girls with switched bodies in high school, anti-bullying, adorable message. And I just knew there was a huge audience desperate for this. Mother, daughters, Christians, even maybe people who are not Christians, who are just looking for clean content that speaks life into their kids. And you wouldn't believe it. We were rejected by everyone, Kathleen. We went to every mainstream studio. They all rejected it because they wanted it to be raunchy. And then we went to all the Christian studios, and they were like, oh, switching bodies, that's not very Christian. And I was like, it's a parable. It's just a parable.
It's a story.
It's just a story that talks about loving your neighbor as yourself, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so, we ended up being able to raise the private investment We were offered $2.5 million from a major distribution company, but the requirement was to make it raunchy and have the girls do inappropriate things. And we walked away from that deal and we were like, God, we will not compromise for you or for anything. And that was really hard when you're a struggling independent filmmaker and someone makes you that offer and you're like, no, okay, no. And I'm so glad.
But such a great point to stop here and just think about and ponder on a little bit, because, you know, actresses, writers, we are being asked right now to compromise our biblical mindset, our biblical foundation, our worldview. And so often I know actors right now here, particularly in Hollywood, writers are being asked to compromise their faith in so many ways. And it's hard when you are living out of the trunk of your car and, you know, living off, you know, Cheerios in the morning and top ramen, you know, for the rest of the day. That gets old. And so I think one of the things I learned early on too, as an actress myself, as a Screen Actors Guild actress working in Hollywood, is I had to know right off who I was and the choices that I was going to make, and to stick to those, because I couldn't let that interfere with my foundation of who I was as a person. Because I think when it starts eating away at you, a little bit here and a little bit here, and I can go a little bit further, then finally somewhere down the road, you realize and you wake up one day, hey, how did I get here? It's just the subtlety of the industry. So you have to decide from the very beginning the choice you're going to make. And I love how you are talking about you have to choose yourself. Joshua tells us that, you know, when they'd reached the promised land and he went out back to the people who were starting to come back to their ways that were not biblically foundational, he said, look, you know, choose today who you're going to serve. As for me and my family, we're going to serve the Lord. And so it's tough, but and it's getting tougher. It's not going to get any easier. But we have to make those choices, I think, if we're going to stick to who we are and the identity of who we want to be associated with, and how we want to be made known, correct? You know?
Amen. Yeah, and like you said, as an actress, I was an actress and I pursued acting, and even the things that I was auditioning for, the things I got, I didn't really want to do them. So even like when we switched out to like cast it, we'd have agents calling being like, oh my gosh, we've been looking for stuff like this. We have girls coming off of Disney and they're not getting anything that's appropriate, that's clean, that's empowering. And so, and even all the girls on set who came to shoot the movie as the actors were like, thank you for creating something that I can be proud of and I don't have to do anything inappropriate. So there's so many layers of what we're doing that even when we're creating something on set, we are involving people in something they can get behind, meaningful content, and then it's going out and giving life-giving truths to these people who are watching it in a fun way. And we, you know, do so much attention to detail in our movies. We care about the costumes, the production design. We don't want someone to say, oh, that was just a faith-based film. They can have a bad connotation. When someone says that they thought our movie was Disney, it's the best compliment we got, because that means we are competing in the market with all the other players, but they know it's different because of the content that it's talking about within the message of the movie.
And Alexandra, I love how you are adamant about creating a film of excellence. Yes. One of our podcast interviews we've just had recently, and for our viewers, if you haven't watched that, you need to watch it, with Lisa London, who helped cast all of your films. Yep. She's a top A-list casting director here in Hollywood. Has discovered a few little friends like Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston and Miley Cyrus, and yet has the same mindset that we need to be creating films that are for the family, that are family safe, and at the same time culturally relevant and fun, that teen girls are going to want to watch. And we're not going to negate or sacrifice excellence within the film, even if we have a small budget, right? So even what you did within working with a small budget, you were able to pull in some top A-list people to participate in it. So I love that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that they wanted to, we had Denise Richards and John Schneider and Vanessa Merrill. And one of the reasons, Denise came up to me on set day one on Switched, and she said, "Are you the writer?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "Thank you for writing this. I have teen girls. They're struggling with bullying online and social media, and it's only getting worse." And she was like, "I wanted to be a part of this movie because I care so much about young girls. And thank you." And so, we're able to get some really star talent name because they care about the message and the story. And anytime that you're working with people, you don't want people to clock in on your set for money. You want them to clock in because they care. They will bring their A game, and they will come and work harder because they believe in the message of the story. And when I called, I feel like we all grew up with Clueless and Mean Girls, and clothes are so important. And if you watch any of our movies, we're very into the clothes because we think that's so important for girls who love clothes. And God has no problem with us loving to look good in clothes. So I got this costume designer, and I was like, I want this to be on Disney quality level clothes. Like, I want the clothes to be so hip and cool, but I don't want them to be inappropriate. So I want to show kids that they can dress really hip and cool without dressing in a way that sexualizes them or is inappropriate. And so he was like, "Okay, let's do this." And then he was watching everything, and he came back to me. He's like, "It's really hard. Girls are dressing really provocative." And I said, "Exactly. And our job with this movie is to show there's an alternative that's still hip and cool." And him and I worked really closely on the clothes to make sure that it was so awesome. And that's a big compliment we get, is that the clothes are on point and amazing, but also without being inappropriate, because our job is to, as filmmakers, to empower young women in all the different ways. And we're the alternative to all the horrible messaging that these young girls are getting. And I love that. I love that people are like, "I thought it was Disney." But then they watch it and they're like, "Oh, we know it's not Disney."
Well,
That's okay.
it falls into your second film, Identity Crisis, because we all want to be identified and identify with the hip and cool stuff, right? Especially at that age.
Yep.
When you're in a culture where all of that really is so pervasive and so overwhelming for girls at school and girls in that culture and in that age range right now, particularly, women and other girls around you. I mean, you are constantly wanting to live up to what's trending right now and what's the hip and cool thing. And so I love how you put some emphasis on that. That was important. But then you moved into the identity crisis, which is so relevant for our culture and our world today. Talk to us about that film a little bit.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. And this is also the power of like prayer and trusting God on what story to write, because we wrote this story before society got a little bit crazy with identity, but God was preparing our hearts to create something that could speak into culture in a beautiful way. So Identity Crisis is about a shy science whiz in college who struggles with imposter syndrome and confidence, which is one of the biggest things that freshman girls in college struggle with, is not raising their hand unless they're 100% right. Girls fall behind only because they won't raise their hand or apply unless they're 100% right, where a guy will raise their hand if they have 1% of the answer. And then, so we wanted to speak into that. And so it's about this girl who feels, not good enough and doesn't want to put herself out there. And she figures out how to clone herself and create what she thinks is the perfect identity, which is courageous, outgoing, all those characteristics, and sends her off to do all the things that she's afraid of, only to discover that God already created her the perfect version of herself. And he gave her all the courage. She just needed to try. And this really fun illustration of cloning is just to really actually show us that our identity lies in Christ. And we were created on purpose, for a purpose, by a creator who loves us so much. And it's such a fun story with a very, very important message for young girls to know that they were fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And it's such a timely message for our culture and our world today, who are struggling with their identity and being pushed into elements and into a culture, actually even cults, I believe, and what's happening with our young girls wanting to switch genders, not even wanting to be associated with a gender. We all want to be, gender free almost in our culture and our world today. The Bible tells us that we were made male and female, and we need to identify with one of those identities and the identity he has, that we were born into, and that he gave us and blessed us with. And what does that look like for us as individuals and as believers in who God tells us we are in him to begin with first. So I love this movie. It's just such a timely thing. So
can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, one more thing. Yeah.
One more thing. When we did research, we studied the Genome Project, which was it comes out of Howard University with Dr. Georgia Dunstan. She's a Christian scientist. And the Genome Project has discovered that we each have 3 billion characteristics that only you have. Only you have. And it is unbelievable that the science behind, and this is Christian scientists, behind our creator who created us, 3 billion. You are unique and special, and were created by a design, by a creator. And that's what's so beautiful about the movie, because we talk a lot about how much precision is in creation. Yes. And it's no accident. Yes. Our creator knew exactly what he was doing. So I just want to bring it out so people know that they have 3 billion characteristics that only they have, because that's how special we are.
Yes, we are uniquely and wonderfully made, as the Bible tells us. Yeah, so true. So switching gears just a little bit to, is it getting any easier? You've made several films. You've, got several under your belt. You've got a resume going. Where are you today? And does it get any easier to produce these films, or do we, what's God teaching you about that, and the long journey of who you are in this career and what he's called you to do?
Yes. Well, I think one of the reasons he called me is because he knew I was bullheaded and I don't give up and I work hard and I have way too much energy. And he's like, I know she'll just keep pushing her way through. Because honestly, I haven't felt like it's gotten easier. I actually think with the way our industry is going, I think that it's getting harder because, we got rejected by a lot of the streamers for Identity Crisis. And one of the streamers wrote back and said, this is not the direction we're going with our YA content. And we were like, yeah, we know what direction you're going, and we're trying to change that. So we're up against, some massive machines that do not want to include our work. So I feel like that, we've been praying.
Besides the deceiver that's behind us, and the Bible says we're not fighting against what we see, but what we don't see. So there you
big go. Time. Yes, absolutely. So, we're always praying and we're always hustling and we're always looking for people who align with us and believe in us. Andrea and I even just started something called the Million Mom Campaign. And we've said if 1 million moms gave us $1, we can make our next movie. And we're going out to our audience because we've had such a pushback from studios on the kind of content we want to do, but yet mothers and families are desperate for this content. So we're like, okay, we'll do what Angel Studios did. We'll go directly to our audience and say, you want our next movie? Could you give us $1 to help us make it? Because it isn't getting easier. And so we're just kind of like, there has to be an alternative. And we have raised all the private investment for our films. And those people who invested in us believed in the messaging of our movies. And then thank goodness for Vertical Entertainment and RLJ Releasing and these distribution companies that take our movies out and still promote what we're doing. Because like you said, there's a huge enemy against us. So unfortunately, it hasn't gotten easier. I was like, okay, what is this going to get easier? Right, Kathleen? Like I've been in this industry 24 years and I'm like,
doesn't get easier. And I've been in it a long time too. It does not get easier. But you know what? I see a little bit of what we've been talking about, Alexandra. You started out as an actress, realizing that you, and like myself, I got tired of driving for, across town, sitting for, in this waiting room, hoping to get picked for a role and thinking, okay, I got to do something else about it. Same thing with you. You got to the point where waiting for somebody to pick you to put you in something. No, let's create my own project.
Right.
And you've created your own project, and now you're taking it even a step further, I think, in being even more bold, more courageous, and saying, look, I'm tired of going to some of these studios asking for production money and help in creating our next film. I've done them. Obviously, I've proved my worth, my value, that they've been money makers and financially sound, and audiences are resonating with them, and you're still having trouble raising the funds. So let's take that into our own hands and start raising the funds for our next film. And so, that's what we do as women. It's why Influence Women and our events and what we're doing was created, is so that we can collaborate and we can encourage and inspire each other to go into these challenging places and be bold and courageous today in what we have to do. If we're going to change our culture and our world, stop complaining about what we're seeing in our screens. We've got to start supporting the people who are making the content that we're seeing in our screens. So, I'm cheering you on, as is every other Influence Women member today, that you'll get, your next financing for your next film. You've proven your worth. You've done the hard work. You're willing to go where it's difficult and to tackle difficult subjects. And we need that content in our screen. So, I'm cheering you on, girl.
Thank you. Well, it's so true what you said, because Andrea and I were just talking about that. And Andrea said exactly, I feel like you just confirmed exactly what God wants us to do, because she's like, let's stop waiting for someone else to pick our movies. Let's go right to our audience. Let's choose ourselves and say, exactly what you said too. It's like, we can complain about a problem. No, we have to do something about the problem. And Andrea and I are trying to create the solution to the problem, which is creating alternative films that are just as great as mainstream, for families, trusted. And, we get messages all day long from parents who are like, oh my gosh, my daughter just found Switched on Tubi. Or I just had a message from a woman in Scotland who said her daughter has been waiting for our next movie and they couldn't wait to watch Identity Crisis. And I'm like, okay, there are people all over the world waiting for what we're doing. Okay, Lord, how do we take this into our own hands and make sure that we are providing the content they need? So, and that you're absolutely right. And we're not going to stop.
We've got to go for it. We just have to go for it. Yes. I have just moved in the last month to being the global director for Influence Women. Our chapter groups are expanding and growing all over the culture in the world today. I travel a lot, as many of you know that watch this podcast and know of our work and what Influence Women is doing. I've been in 9 countries in the last year and just returned from Spain and on my way to Cyprus and the UK. So on and on and on. I tell everybody I'm keeping my tennis shoes on these days. But, it's difficult because we hear the complaints out there of wanting great content for our kids and our next generation and for ourselves. We are a culture, we were created by our creator, God, to resonate with story. And we need to be supporting these women. So as the national director or the global director now for Influence Women, my job is now to raise the funds to help support people like Alexandra and people that have been on our other podcasts. So, I would encourage you, if you want to see great content made, let's support our filmmakers, particularly female filmmakers. I believe we've got some courageous ones out there. Statistics tell us that only 26% of the top positions in the industry, writers, directors, producers, are held by women. And yet women are the go-to people, I believe, in getting great stories out there and resonating with our children and with our culture. It's women in the families that decide what movies are going to be seen at home. It's women who decide what they're going to drag their boyfriend to, or their husband to, or their family to at the theaters. And so let's support them. And so I encourage you, if you're thinking about needing to see where you're going to put your gifts and future participation and support, that you do support influence women, you support great filmmakers like Alexandra and the Boylan sisters and what they're doing. We need female filmmakers out there, and we need to be supporting each other. So that's my little commercial in the middle of our podcast.
I love it. Everything you said is so true.
So Alexandra, we're going to wind this up here pretty quickly, but if you could leave one tip with a young filmmaker today who's struggling, and how your faith has been a part of and helped to bring you courage and boldness in what you're doing, what would it be, that last final comment that you would leave, that you could empower the women listening and watching today?
Yes. Well, first off, I always say, just do it. Don't look for the forest for the trees. You look one tree at a time. If you look all the way through and think, if I start a movie or a project or media right now, I'll never get there. You just got to do one thing at a time, and then your project will be done. But I think the biggest thing I would say with my faith is I've gone into some really big meetings at Netflix and Hulu, and I have said some very bold things in the room, and I am okay with that because I know that God is standing behind me. Like, sometimes when I walk into a meeting and I'm nervous, I'm like, I have the creator of the universe right here behind me. I know he's with me. He's for me. He's got me. And I work for him. I don't work for the studio system. I work for the Lord. And so that has given me, I get goosebumps right now. That has given me so much confidence when I go into a meeting, and if something's said that I think is inappropriate, I'll call it out. And I don't care if I lose my position there, because I don't work for them. I work for the Lord. And I know he has my back. And I'm telling you, just having that visual when you walk into a meeting, because it's intimidating. You're going in, there's a room full of 20 people you got to pitch to or talk to. And I think sometimes before I'll walk in, I'll just be like, how you doing, God? All right, you ready, Lord? Okay, we're going to do this. I got this. And we got this together. And I think that will change your posture when you walk in. You are not going in alone. And who do you work for and who are you representing is all that I think about. And it has given me so much strength in this business to be bold for the Lord. And that will help you if you just think that way. Don't go into the meeting thinking ego or yourself. Think, what are you doing for the Lord? What does he want you to do? And then I know that we're going to have so many people in heaven that are there because of the work we're doing that's going out. Media is the greatest influence in the world.
Amen.
Films are being seen all over the world. We're not knocking on their door. They're turning their TV on and they're finding our work. And so we're just needing to work harder all the time, because God needs us to go out there and be bold for him so that he can bring people to him. So that's my nugget of advice. And
love that. Love it. Love it. Love it.
And one more thing. Yes. What is impossible for us is possible for God. So when you're called into something where I've been called in going, that's not going to work. That's impossible. We don't have enough money. There isn't enough crew. No, God has it. You just have to step out in faith, and God will provide what you need. It's impossible for us to do it. It's just not
impossible
for God to
love it, love it, love it. And so true. Let's just think about the story of, when the boat was about ready to tip over and the storm was raging. Peter sees Jesus coming, walking across the water, right? Jesus is coming, walking across the water. He's calling us out to walk on the water that does not look solid and does not look like you can do it. And yet Jesus said, come on. And Peter was bold enough to do it. And the only time he failed is when he looked down and when he stopped keeping his eyes on Jesus. Right. We've got to keep our eyes on him. We've got to. He said we can do it. If we seek the kingdom first, he will give us the desires and the abilities to do what we need to do of our heart. I truly believe that. Well, thanks for being with us today, Alexandra. You're always a light that shines in my life and an encouragement. And I know you've been an encouragement to so many today. So we thank you for being a part of it. Thank you so much for your participation, get it out there, in all you do with Influence Women. And we're so grateful for you. So we're cheering you on to that next movie. So we'll see you. And thanks for joining us today on the Influence Women podcast. Thanks for joining us today for the Influence Women podcast. We were thrilled to have Alexandra Boylan with us. She's a great filmmaker, and I know what she spoke about really resonated with you and hopefully brought you some wisdom and tips in your life. Don't forget to subscribe and like us. We want you to follow us and be a part of the Influence Women podcast. So ring the bell below and be notified for the next Influence Women podcast. And we'll see you next time.